Election season is upon us. So as we look forward to an endless stream of campaign ads, conspiracy theories, mudslinging, and then a big argument at the end over who really won, imagine what a USA would be like if someone the nation never elected became president. That would be pretty stupid, wouldn't it? Well, it has happened, and it could easily happen again. It's time for Things You'd Rather Not Know. It's called the United States Presidential Line of Succession, and it's the order in which officials of the United States federal government assume the powers and duties of the office of President of the United States if the incumbent president becomes incapacitated, dies, resigns, or is removed from office via impeachment by the House of Representatives and subsequent conviction in a trial by the Senate. The line of succession follows this order: Vice President, Speaker of the House of Representatives, President pro tempore of the Senate, and then the eligible heads of federal executive departments who form the president's cabinet. Since 1789, the vice president has replaced the incumbent on 9 occasions. William Henry Harrison died of pneumonia. Zachary Taylor died just 30 days into office of a digestive ailment. Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy were assassinated. Warren Harding died of a heart attack. FDR died of a stroke, and Richard Nixon resigned. Additionally, 2 vice presidents have temporarily assumed the powers and duties of the presidency as acting president. George H.W. Bush did so once in 1985, and Dick Cheney did so twice, once in 2002 and once in 2007. Now, so far, the offices of president and vice president have never been vacant at the same time, but it nearly happened twice. The person who assassinated President Lincoln was also targeting Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William Seward, and possibly General Ulysses S. Grant, as part of a plot to destabilize the Union government. 3 years later, Johnson, as president, was impeached by the House of Representatives and faced removal from office if convicted at trial in the Senate. Johnson stayed in office, but it was only by 1 vote. And at that time, we had no vice president. So the flaw in the system is that we could end up with a president the country never elected. It almost happened twice. On July 2, 1881, James Garfield was shot. The president wavered between life and death for 80 days after the shooting, and it was the first time that the nation as a whole experienced the uncertainties associated with a prolonged period of presidential inability. Now, most Garfield administration personnel and members of Congress had to deal with, well, the lack of constitutional guidance on how to handle this situation. No one was sure who, if anyone, should exercise presidential authority while the president was out of commission. A lot of people urged Vice President Chester Arthur to step up, but he declined, fearful of being labeled an opportunist. President Woodrow Wilson was debilitated by a stroke for 17 months of his presidency. Though members of both parties in Congress encouraged Vice President Thomas Marshall to take over, Marshall refused to do anything that might seem ambitious or disloyal to Wilson. Now, there was a lot of infighting at the time over whether or not the United States should join the League of Nations, not to mention issues at home like strikes, unemployment, inflation, and the threat of communism. But there was no constitutional basis, no standard for declaring that a president was unable to function. So what did we do? We winged it for 17 months. So how did we end up with a president the country never elected? Well, in October of 1973, at the height of Watergate, Vice President Spiro Agnew resigned. Long story short, Richard Nixon nominated Gerald Ford, and Ford was approved by Congress, to become vice president. Later, Richard Nixon himself would resign, and Gerald Ford then moved into the office of the presidency in 1974. Now that's wacky. It's one thing for an elected vice president to take over. I mean, after all, the vice president is elected along with the president by a nationwide ballot. But Gerald Ford, who was nominated by then President Nixon and confirmed by Congress, hadn't been elected to the job of vice presidency, much less the President of the United States, which was where he ended up. Now, there's no nationwide election for anyone further down the line than vice president, so we can once again find ourselves at any time with a president our country never chose. Some Ebola-contaminated lettuce finds its way into the White House salad bar, and who knows who we'll be stuck with. Oh, Constitution, you so silly. This has been Things You'd Rather Not Know. Thank you for watching. See you soon. And remember, you are always, always welcome here.